At some point after 40, a man begins to feel it, that subtle panic that his story might already be over. The ambitions that once defined him start to fade. The victories that once fed his ego no longer satisfy. He wakes up one morning and realizes he's been climbing a mountain that no longer feels like his. Society calls it a midlife crisis. Carl Jung called it the turning of the soul, because what dies at 40 isn't your youth, it's your illusion. For decades, men are taught to measure life in external markers: career, money, women, status. We build our persona, the mask Jung said we wear to function in the world. It's the social self, confident, capable, productive. But around midlife, that mask begins to crack. You achieve what you thought would make you fulfilled, yet something in you whispers, "Is this all?" That whisper is not depression. It's the call of the deeper self, the part you've ignored while chasing validation. Most men mistake it for failure. They try to outrun it with new goals, new lovers, new distractions. They buy the car, chase the thrill, start over, anything to silence the growing emptiness. But Jung knew this was not the end of life's story. It was the midpoint, the beginning of the second act. Because the first half of life is about building. The second half is about becoming. The first half is about mastering the world. The second half is about mastering yourself. When that realization hits, it feels like loss, but it's really initiation. The crumbling of the external is nature's way of forcing you inward. The old energies that once drove you, ambition, lust, competition, begin to turn from outer conquest toward inner power. And that's where the real transformation begins. Jung believed that midlife is when the ego finally encounters the unconscious, the vast hidden part of the psyche that has been shaping your life from behind the scenes. Dreams intensify, memories resurface, desires shift. You begin to feel pulled toward meaning rather than success, toward depth rather than validation. That pull terrifies most men because it demands surrender. It asks you to stop pretending, to admit that the image you built, the husband, the achiever, the provider, is not the full story. The truth is, after 40, your body may slow down, but your potential expands, because the ego that once limited you begins to dissolve. You no longer need to prove who you are. You start to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. And that is the beginning of power. The man in his 20s is fast but blind. The man in his 30s is driven but conflicted. The man beyond 40 has seen enough of life's illusions to finally act from clarity. He no longer chases meaning, he embodies it. So if you're a man who feels lost, restless, or unfinished after 40, understand this: you're not declining, you're awakening. The world may tell you that your prime is behind you. Jung would tell you that your true life is just beginning, because only after the illusion dies can the man be born. By the time a man reaches his 40s, he's mastered the performance. He knows how to look successful, how to stay composed, how to play the part society rewards. He's built a persona, a mask carefully crafted from decades of effort. But Carl Jung warned that the persona, no matter how convincing, is not the man. It's a costume designed for survival in the first half of life. It gets you through the marketplace, wins you respect, builds your career, keeps the peace. The problem is, every mask becomes a prison when you forget you're wearing it. That's what midlife exposes. It's the point where the cracks in the persona begin to show. You wake up and realize that everything you built, the house, the job, the reputation, no longer reflects who you are inside. You've been living a script written by the expectations of others, and the energy that once drove you, the hunger to achieve, to conquer, to prove, starts to decay. What once felt like ambition now feels like exhaustion. What once felt like purpose now feels like pretense. This is the moment most men misinterpret as failure. They think they've lost their edge, But Jung would say, you haven't lost power, you've lost illusion. The death of the persona is not collapse, it's transformation, because what's dying isn't your vitality, it's your false identity. The man who lived for image, for applause, for validation must die so the authentic man can finally live. This process feels brutal because it tears apart everything that once gave you meaning. It dismantles the ego's empire brick by brick. You feel exposed, uncertain, restless. The old goals lose their pull, but the new path hasn't yet revealed itself. It's a psychological winter, the dark night of the masculine soul. Most men panic. They cling to the persona harder. They try to resurrect the image of who they once were. Through success, sex, distraction, denial. They chase youth because they're terrified of what comes next. But those who resist the death of the persona never find rebirth. They get stuck, aging on the outside, but emotionally frozen in time. The rare man, however, allows the mask to fall. He stops pretending to be the man others expect him to be and begins to confront the man he actually is. And what he finds there isn't weakness, it's truth. Underneath the persona lies everything you've suppressed for decades. Your fears, your creative impulses, your regrets, your longings, your unexpressed potential. All the parts of you that didn't fit the mask now demand your attention. Jung called this the return of the repressed. It's not comfortable, but it's sacred. Because only by facing what you've buried can you become whole. The man who refuses this descent stays half alive, ruled by the expectations of others. But the man who lets the persona die begins to feel something extraordinary: relief. He no longer has to perform. He no longer has to prove. He no longer has to carry the exhausting burden of being perfect. He begins to rediscover the raw authenticity he had before the world taught him to pretend. And with that authenticity comes new power, the power of truth. Because nothing is stronger than a man who has stopped lying to himself. The death of the persona isn't the end of your identity, it's the end of imitation. It's the start of a life that finally belongs to you. You've spent decades serving the world. Now the world must meet the man behind the mask. And that man, unfiltered and unshaken, is far more dangerous than the one society trained you to be. Once the mask falls, a man comes face to face with what he's spent decades avoiding: his own shadow. Carl Jung believed that every man carries within him a vast hidden reservoir of instincts, emotions, and memories that were banished from consciousness in order to appear good, responsible, and civilized. This is the shadow, the part of you that holds everything your persona rejected. And when the persona dies, the shadow steps forward. This is why midlife feels so chaotic. Suddenly, things you thought were buried resurface: anger, jealousy, lust, regret, unfulfilled ambition. You start questioning the life you built. You begin to crave experiences you can't explain. You feel impulses that seem to contradict everything you once believed about yourself. You might think you're falling apart, but Jung would say you're finally coming together. Because the shadow isn't evil, it's energy. It's the raw, unrefined, masculine vitality you locked away to fit into society's mold. It contains your aggression, your sexual fire, your creativity, your drive, all the instincts that made you dangerous before the world trained you to be tame. The tragedy of modern men is that we're raised to believe virtue means suppression. We're told to be polite, productive, and predictable, to bury anything wild, anything dark, anything powerful. And by midlife, we've buried so much of ourselves that we no longer know who we are. But the shadow doesn't die just because you ignore it. It waits. It whispers through your dreams, through your frustrations, through the dull ache of unfulfilled potential. And eventually, it demands recognition. When that moment comes, most men run. They distract themselves with work, sex, alcohol, or spiritual bypassing, anything to avoid the confrontation. But the man who dares to descend, who looks into his darkness without flinching, finds treasure where others find fear. Because the shadow is not your enemy, it's your missing power. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's the task of midlife, to take back what you exiled, to integrate, not to purify, to accept that you are not simply the good man you pretended to be. You are also the angry man, the lustful man, the ambitious man, the creative man, the dangerous man. And until you own those parts, they own you. The man who represses his aggression becomes passive. The man who denies his lust becomes restless. The man who hides his ambition becomes bitter. But the man who integrates these forces transforms them into strength. He becomes whole. This descent within is not a moral act, it's alchemy. The base metals of your nature, instinct, desire, fear, are melted down in the fire of consciousness and reborn as wisdom, restraint, and power. This is why Jung saw midlife as the gateway to individuation, the process of becoming one's true self. Not a mask, not an idea, but a living integration of light and shadow, of reason and instinct, of the divine and the animal. Only through that descent can a man rediscover his full energy. Because the fire that burned in you at 20 doesn't die at 40. It's simply buried beneath responsibility, routine, and repression. When you bring that fire back into awareness, it no longer burns you, it fuels you. It becomes creativity, conviction, purpose. You stop chasing stimulation because you've reconnected with your own source of energy. You stop fearing desire because it no longer controls you. You stop pretending to be perfect because you understand that perfection is fragmentation. And this is where real power begins. Not in denial of the shadow, but in its integration. Because the man who knows his darkness cannot be manipulated by it. The man who owns his flaws cannot be blackmailed by guilt. The man who has met his demons walks through the world unafraid. That is the descent Jung spoke of. Not a fall, but a return. A return to wholeness, to authenticity, to the raw center of your masculine being. And from that center, you rise again. Stronger, calmer, wiser. When a man has faced his shadow and survived, something changes in him that others can sense instantly. His energy no longer leaks through insecurity, guilt, or pretense. It gathers quietly, steadily, like gravity. This is what Carl Jung called the second birth. The first birth is biological. It brings you into the world. The second birth is psychological. It brings you into yourself. After 40, when the mask has fallen and the shadow has been faced, you stop living reactively. You stop chasing the world. You begin to create it. The man in his 20s acts from ambition. The man in his 30s acts from momentum. But the man beyond 40 acts from essence. He doesn't need to prove anymore. He's already seen what power, sex, and success really offer, and what they can never give. He's been betrayed, disillusioned, humbled. But instead of turning bitter, he becomes precise. He knows now what truly matters: inner stability, mastery of mind, alignment between thought and action. He's no longer intoxicated by noise. He values peace over pleasure, solitude over validation, truth over comfort. This is not withdrawal, it's evolution. Jung said that midlife marks a shift of the psyche from the external to the internal world. The focus turns from achievement to meaning, from expansion to integration, from ego to essence. And that shift is what gives a mature man his real power. Because power in youth is kinetic, it's fire. Power in maturity is gravitational, it's presence. A young man commands attention through movement. A mature man commands it through stillness. The energy of a 40-year-old man who has made peace with himself is unlike anything else. His calmness feels dangerous. His silence carries weight. He no longer reacts impulsively because he's not controlled by his emotions anymore. He has integrated them. That's why Jung saw the second half of life as sacred. He believed that true masculine strength doesn't emerge until a man has faced the limits of his ego and surrendered them. Before that, everything is rehearsal, noise before music. Once a man reaches this second birth, his ambitions don't die, they evolve. His work becomes about legacy, not applause. His relationships become about truth, not performance. His presence becomes healing, not chaotic. He moves through life with the calm assurance of someone who has already been through hell and learned to make fire his ally. That's the quiet authority that draws others toward him. Women, men, everyone. They can sense he isn't pretending. His peace isn't weakness, it's control. He can lead because he no longer needs to dominate. He can love because he no longer fears loss. He can give because he no longer gives himself away. And that balance between power and restraint, confidence and humility, is what makes him magnetic. This is the phase where men who were once dismissed or overlooked suddenly stand out. Their energy feels rare. In a world full of anxious, distracted youth, their stillness becomes a kind of light. Because power in maturity isn't loud, it's undeniable. The man who's been reborn through self-knowledge carries a presence that cannot be faked. His calmness commands respect without demand. His boundaries are felt without explanation. His vision is steady, his emotions measured, his movements deliberate. He has become a master of himself, and therefore, a master of life. Jung believed that this is where true individuality begins. The second birth isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you always were, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the striving. It's the moment when the warrior becomes the sage, when desire transforms into discipline, when energy finally serves wisdom. And from that synthesis arises something the modern world has nearly forgotten: masculine serenity. The peace of a man who no longer chases anything because he has already found himself. After 40, a man who has faced his shadow and surrendered his ego doesn't become smaller, he becomes vast. His energy feels different now. It doesn't explode outward, it radiates inward. He no longer burns to prove himself, he glows with certainty. Carl Jung said that when a man completes the individuation process, he returns to himself as to a long-forgotten home. That is the journey of midlife, the return, not to youth, but to truth. The young man chases experience, the older man distills wisdom. The young man strives for control, the older man embodies it. The young man wants to be admired, the older man wants to be understood, and when he realizes few will ever understand him, he stops needing it. This is the hidden truth Jung left for men, that the second half of life is not decline, but ascension. The first half is the rehearsal, the gathering of tools, the building of the mask, the tasting of victories and losses. But the second half is when you finally pick up those tools and begin the real work, yourself. And the man who accepts this transformation becomes formidable, because he no longer seeks external validation. His decisions are clean. Because he no longer fears failure, his actions are deliberate. Because he no longer worships youth, his presence carries a quiet depth the world can feel but can't explain. He becomes what Jung called a complete man, one who has united his opposing forces, his fire and his calm, his passion and his logic, his chaos and his order. Such a man moves differently. He no longer reacts to provocation. He no longer justifies himself. He no longer wastes his life trying to convert people who cannot meet him where he stands. His strength lies in restraint. His wisdom lies in timing. His power lies in presence. He becomes the eye of the storm, the center of stability in a world spinning itself apart. This is why Jung believed that aging men are not meant to fade quietly, but to rise as anchors of consciousness. In youth, you build empires. In maturity, you build meaning. And that meaning, the integration of your story, the understanding of your patterns, the acceptance of your flaws, becomes your legacy. It's no longer about what you do, but what you are. The man who has returned doesn't seek attention, but he gets it effortlessly. People trust him without knowing why. They feel safer around him, not because he's powerful in the worldly sense, but because he is whole. His calm is contagious. His clarity disarms conflict. His silence speaks louder than the speeches of younger men still trying to find themselves. He's not competing with youth. He's transcending it. And that's the secret the world doesn't tell you. After 40, when most men think their best days are gone, their real power is only beginning. Because finally, you are no longer divided. Your ambition serves wisdom. Your energy serves purpose. Your desire serves truth. You become what Jung described as a vessel of consciousness, a man who no longer chases meaning because he has become it. And that's what makes the mature masculine so dangerous, so magnetic, and so needed. In a world obsessed with noise and novelty, he carries the one thing everyone secretly craves: presence that does not break. You are not past your prime. You are stepping into it. After 40, your real life begins. Not because you've gained something new, but because you've finally let go of everything false. So if you feel restless, uncertain, or empty at this stage in your life, don't run from it. It's not decay. It's rebirth. You're not losing power. You're reclaiming it. Because the man who has returned to himself is no longer chasing the world. He's shaping it. If this truth resonates with you, write in the comments, "I've returned." Share this with a brother who thinks he's too old to change, because he's not. He's right on time. And in our next video, we'll go deeper into the hidden power of aging with Why the World Fears the Calm Man, Jung's secret of inner authority. Stay grounded, stay awake, stay powerful.